Hey YouTube fam, I put the intro music in because I know you guys love hearing the episode start off with just that music. Wanted to put that in there for you, but again, just because of time constraints and stuff like that, we're just going to release the full podcast on today's episode of Dead Rabbit Radio, so I hope you guys enjoy. The full podcast episode starts now. The discovery of bones in a trailer home lead to some unanswered questions. A drinking game gets out of control when it involves a power drill. And then we cover one of the most disturbing topics that we've ever talked about on this show. John Sharp and his Speargun, today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. Saying that, hold on a second, I'm going to pop some ibuprofen. And some Sudafed while I'm at it. One more second. And I'm going to wash it down with a delicious cup of Diet Cranberry Sprite. You know, it's funny, I'm actually do drink that, and as I was listening back to the last episode we did about monkeys don't exist, I thought, you know what, they're going to sue me because I was equating Diet Cranberry Sprite with Hans, the lunatic. Okay, so ibuprofen, a little bit of Sudafed. Oh, I dropped the Sudafed, the smallest of all my pills. Oh, there it is. Ah! There it is. Why do they make pills round? They're like, let's design something that people need to stay healthy, and let's make it in the most rollable form. So if they drop it, it rolls and collects all the dust underneath their chair. I guess I really should just dust under my chair. Who dusts under their chair? But I've never dusted in my life. I think dusting is the dumbest of all cleaning activities. I've never dusted anything. Maybe for dramatic effect, I ran my finger over a dust line, but that's it. I don't ever dust. So before we get started, it was funny. I was looking at this. So, like I said, I've been working a lot. That's why the episodes are a bit shorter. This one might be around... Actually, they've all been around normal length, but... Oh, and I do have to say this real quick. Last night's episode, Monkeys Don't Exist, took forever to record. The Monkeys Don't Exist story, I actually did 3 takes. The first one I was just kind of like... And then the monkey guy, he doesn't believe it, and these videos are fake. Isn't that wacky? Oh my god, look at all of this stuff that this guy doesn't believe in. And I'm recording it, and I felt myself zoning out thinking, oh my god, this might be the worst episode I've ever recorded. That's not true. I actually know the worst episode I ever recorded. There was an episode a long time ago, I almost quit. I hated it so much. I'll talk about that some other time, but I hated that episode. But anyways, I started to zone out, and then I was like, cut, and I started it completely from scratch. And I was going on again, like each take was maybe 15 minutes. And I'm like, I could care less about this topic. Like I felt the topic was super interesting, but my delivery was so bad. And I was honestly thinking, this might be the end of Dead Rabbit Radio. Like maybe I'm just working the 3 jobs. Maybe I'm just too tired, mentally tired to do this type of show anymore. And I sat there, I stopped recording for a long period of time. I just sat there silently in front of the mic. And I thought, I'm going to come up with a narrative to it. And then that's when I invented the idea of Hans in your bedroom. And it turns out to be one of my favorite episodes. But yeah, after I got done recording it, I was laughing really loud when I was editing it. You laughing at your own stuff's pretty indulgent. But yeah, I was like, okay, so I think I'm going to use that narrative device. I'm going to use it sparingly. But there are other conspiracies that I've had on the dock that were just lists of lunatic facts. And I was like, it would be lame if I just read these facts off. I couldn't figure out a way to deliver it. So I just kind of, like, Bam Margera's Afterlife is one of them that I've had research for a long time, but I'm like, it will just be me listing stuff off. But I've created this narrative device, and I think that'll pop up, especially with that one, because it works. But where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, 3 jobs. So I was mentally tired yesterday, but part of one of my jobs is I kind of have to be up on my first aid. I kind of have to know how to like field dress wounds and stuff like that. The jobs are, they're mundane working class jobs. I'm not like a special agent or anything like that. But so I've been reading up on first aid. Now I have an app on my phone that's like the offline survival guide, which makes sense because if you're trapped in the wilderness, you're like, oh, I wish I knew how to make a tourniquet. If only I had 3 bars. Like you want to have it just stored on your phone. And I found a neat little tip. It's only half a tip though. If you have a large blister, you're not supposed to pop it, because then you have to treat it as like an open wound. And again, they're assuming you're out in the middle of nowhere. If you're like at home, well, you still probably shouldn't pop it, but especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere. So they said if you had a large blister, this is so gross. If you have a large blister and you don't want to pop it, but you want to make it smaller, what you do is you take a needle, a sterilized needle, and sterilized thread, which I don't know how you sterilize thread. You can't really boil it because then it just gets all bleh. But anyways, you take a needle and a sterilized thread, and you stick the needle through the blister. And it's big enough to put a needle through. It's not just a tiny blister. You put the needle through the blister, and you pull the string all the way through, and then you take the needle off. So you just have this string hanging out of your blister, and the string, so gross, the string soaks up all of your blister juice. So your blister gets smaller because it's going, like, the thread's absorbing it. Now, that was the end of the tip. And I thought, well, when do you pull the string out? Like, do you just leave it in there forever? The rest of your life, do you just have a string hanging out of your blister? Like, at what point? Eventually, you're going to have to pull it out. Eventually, it will then become an open wound. And, think about it. Yeah, I know having blisters suck. But you know what is secondary to that? Walking with something in your shoe. Like, if you're walking down the street and you have a rock in your shoe, it's very annoying. With this tip, not only do you feel like a string in your shoe, but it keeps getting bigger and gooey. Like, your shoes all... I guess you don't have them in both feet, but, I mean, you have a string, and then eventually becomes yarn, because it's so full of pus. I guess pus is in a blister, right? Some sort of goo. Some sort of human-made liquid. I would totally throw those strings at people, too, just to let you... I'd go to, like a Michael's, and I would pull it out and hide it in the yarn section, and old women are like, ooh, I've never seen this exotic yarn. Old women are like, it smells like taquitos. Must be from Mexico. I had a sister who used to work for a podiatrist. She said sometimes people took their shoes off and they smelled like microwaved taquitos because they were so diseased. Let's go ahead and move on with the episode. I hope none of you were eating taquitos just now. I know it's very popular to listen to Dead Rabbit and eat a taquito, but the first story comes out of our batch of new news. Just a quick overview if you're just into the show. New news are articles from 2004 that I saved in a folder called New News and forgot about until I found them on a computer I was junking. Let's go ahead and look at the first one, though. First one, new news. So this story, of course, takes place in the year 2004, and in my notes, I just wrote Alabama. Maybe? So I couldn't really figure out what state it was from. Because the story was so old, it was hard enough for me to even track down a current article. Because I was downloading web pages, these weren't bookmarks, so it wasn't like I could go back to CBS News. And even if I could, for the most part, that page would probably be purged, because some of them would say this page isn't available, blah, blah, blah. But I did find this one. I was happy enough to find the article. This is weird. So there's a 10-year-old girl named Stephanie Ogden. And she has this imaginary friend, and her imaginary friend is a black girl in a white dress. Never got a name that we know. At least maybe she just called her, I don't know. What's a good name for a ghost? I'm not going to get detracked. I'm not going to get sidetracked. Okay, so she's hanging out with this ghost girl, this black girl with a white dress. They were hanging out for the past 5 years, so Stephanie met this girl. It's weird she doesn't have a name, though. Am I wrong? They don't even say it in the article. She was hanging out with this imaginary friend for 5 years. You know, they're hanging out. That's a long time, too. They're hanging out. The mom said whenever Stephanie wanted a soda, she would have to get 2 sodas, one for her and one for her imaginary friend. I don't know. Check the diabetes on that girl. She's probably lying. But anyways, the parents were like, you don't know, kids have imaginary friends. It's not a big deal. But what happened in today, in the year 2004, what happened was they were doing some renovation on their trailer home. And so they were pulling up their floorboards, and they find a pelvis bone, not an actual pelvis. They find a pelvis bone and a leg bone, and they're like, oh my god, like, what's going on here? And then they continue to, well, I'm sure they called the cops then, but as they were continuing to do renovation, they find another bone. And what's weird is that the bones, when the police investigated it, they said it looked like a rat had been carrying them around underneath the trailer home. Like, it was part of the trailer home itself. It wasn't like They lifted up the floor and they saw a bone in the dirt. It was underneath the insulation, the pink fuzzy stuff. And so the cops are like, it's weird because we see that like a rat had been moving him around, playing him like a xylophone. But the cops said it's also weird, other than the rat moving them, is that the people are up late at night. They're all, where's that xylophone music coming from? The cops are like, I'm kind of mocking this girl's death. The cops are like, we can also tell that there's some sort of, like, there was dirt on them. So at some point they believe that these bones were buried and then brought, or at least sitting outside for a good amount of time and then brought into the home. And they go, well, the rat could have brought them into the home, which is weird because rats don't eat bones. Or somebody could have left the person outside to decay and then put them in the home. Or they could have buried the body and then dug it up, threw it underneath the floorboards, which doesn't make much sense. And the cops were like, here's the thing. This trailer home has had multiple owners and it's been across multiple states. And these are obviously human bones. But we don't know. We'll never be able to track them down. Like, this could have been anyone who ever owned this trailer home. It could have been in any of these states. It could have been unrelated to the trailer home, and a rat was like, oh, dude, these are awesome, and he brought them into his house. Actually, here's a question. Where's that rat? That rat must still be in that trailer home. What rat is big enough to carry a pelvis bone? But, so, the article was making it out to be, they didn't interview the rat. The article was saying that maybe the imaginary friend was the ghost of the little girl who previously had those bones. Now, that's a creepy, story, obviously. You have these bones underneath your floor, and your daughter keeps having this imaginary friend who's humanoid. It's not like Puff the Magic Dragon walking around the backyard drinking the second soda, Diet Cranberry Sprite, but it's creepy enough to have bones under your floor, but then to think this ghost girl was kind of talking to your daughter for the past 5 years. And also, why wasn't the daughter like, hey mom, hey dad, my imaginary friend, she's really cool. We go to school together, we play forts, and her pelvis is under the floor. But yeah, so I mean, it could be connected. It could not be connected. We have to, you know what, actually? It's 14 years later. Stephanie Ogden is now 24 years old. I'm going to see if I can try to track her down and find out more about this. Dude, I didn't even think about that. We have basically a time machine in our possession. The time machine being an old folder of links. This girl's old enough now. So, Stephanie Ogden of Alabama, maybe. Get a hold of us. Get a hold of us if you're one of my 1,100 subscribers on YouTube. Wouldn't that be crazy? But let's see if we can find her. And ask her if she still has this imaginary friend, or what happened to the rat. These are all questions I need to know. No, I'm curious. I'll see what I can dig up, and we'll go on to the next story. Next, new news. So I'm sure that's already gotten old for you. This one is a story of levels. So it's the year, you can guess, it's 2004. We're in Perth, Australia. There is an unnamed man and an unnamed party of people. Now, generally unnamed, you have to take the article with a grain of salt. But he's saying he wants to remain unnamed because it's super embarrassing. But again, you have to take it with a grain of salt. This 20-year-old man is hanging out with his buddies. It's 2004. Chumbawamba's blasting on your radio. That actually, I'm sure even then, I think that song came out in 99. They're like, why are you playing this old song? 50 Cent is killing it with fill in the blank top song. They're like, man, it's gonna suck that there's not gonna be any more Star Wars movies ever. I bet you they could tell the best stories if they just made more Star Wars films. These guys had it all. They had the future ahead of them. And why is this guy unnamed too? I can't do stories with unnamed people. This guy's name is Lightbulb. So no. This guy's name, we'll call him Surge. That's kind of a cool name. We'll pretend he just got 21 years old, he's on break from American Gladiators. So Surge, made up name, don't sue me, real Surge from American Gladiators if you've ever competed in that show. Surge here is hanging out with his other 21-year-old friends. It was a 21st birthday party for somebody else, not Surge. And Surge is there with Nitro and Tank. and Flame On, and they're like, let's all have this drinking game. And they're like, yeah, that's awesome. So one guy pulls out a drinking helmet with a jug on it. And they're like, yeah, dude, we'll just pour liquor in here and it'll drink it in a hose. And someone's like, no, that's kind of lame. That's not how a gladiator rolls. So let's take this pretty benign jug with the hose coming out into your mouth, which isn't that, but it sounds more like a saw trap. So let's take this jug and let's kick it up a notch. Let's kick it up a notch. So they attached a pump to the reservoir where the liquor's going to go in. At this point, all the gladiators are getting a little curious, maybe a little apprehensive, and some guy goes, oh, that's a cool pump, but we need something to power it. And they're like, what do we get, like double A's, triple A's? Dude breaks out a power drill and says, we're going to attach this power drill to the pump and turn it on, and it's going to push all the liquor straight into your stomach. With that absolutely insane and dangerous idea, cheers rose up through the group. Yeah! And they started doing it. Put a hose in your mouth, fill the little reservoir. It wasn't a reservoir, it was a bucket, basically, with beer. And then they turn on the power drill, and the liquor would just be pumped right into your stomach. First guy does it, totally fine. Second guy does it, totally fine. 6 people do it all in all, no problem. So Serge steps up, and he's like, yeah, I can do this. Puts the hose in his mouth. Someone turns the power drill on. Now, Serge's quote later, much later, said, and I'm paraphrasing the first part, but he was saying that he knew something was wrong when he started to throw up, quote, red stuff, unquote. Serge, that's known as blood. It's not generally called red stuff. And that's exactly what happened. He began vomiting up blood and alcohol and basically fell down. His friends rushed him to the hospital in their gladiator mobile. They're in those big balls that they all have to run in. They're like, hurry up, get him. His body's like flipping. Anyways, they get him to the hospital. They get him to Thunderdome Med. Take him in there. What happened was the force of the liquor going into his stomach was so intense. It ripped a 10 centimeter, I don't know what that is in real measurement, but a 10 centimeter rip in his stomach. So all the beer and all the cheap food and all the weight-gaining supplements and the creatine powder, all of that pushed into his body. And the doctors are basically like, this dude's toast. There's no way this guy's going to make it, but, we get paid by the hour. So they opened him up. I don't know if they get paid by the hour, but they opened him up and they were able to kind of vacuum everything out. And they had to give him a ton of antibiotics. And I think it was like a week or 2. But he was in a coma, was touch and go and all that stuff. Imagine... I just imagine getting a rip in your stomach's bad enough, but then to imagine like the taquitos you just ate, or those 20 chicken nuggets and all that stuff just hitting your liver, they're just like bumping around in you. The stomach acid would burn, that'd probably be the only thing you would feel, but I think you would also just, like I said, you have a pebble in your shoe, that's irritating. Imagine having 20 chicken nuggets just hanging out in your body. They're out of your stomach, they're just chilling, you have these little you have like a little boot-shaped lump pushing against your stomach. He probably didn't care what his stomach looked like. He was dying. But the moral of the story, obviously, is don't indulge in stupid drinking games. But I think the bigger moral of the story is, why doesn't everyone just use English measurement? What is it called? Imperial? Why do people still use stuff like centimeters and kilometers? I don't get that. These articles from other countries are irritating. Just use inches, bro. It makes you seem taller, kind of. I mean, if somebody says, I'm 300 centimeters tall, you sound, no matter how many things, no matter how big the number is before centimeter, you sound tiny. You sound absolutely tiny. Just say inches or feet. Something. Guys, get on board. Just get on board. For the sake of this podcast. And the sake of the fact that I could use Google and easily... You know what? Here, let's find out how big 10 centimeters is. Because I do have the internet in front of me. It better be impressive, though, because I'm going to be upset otherwise. Where's my phone? Oh, I have a like on Tinder. Okay, let's see here. This better be impressive or I'm going to be mad. 10 centimeters in inches. It's 3 inches. That's a sizable gap. I want to see how tall I am in centimeters. I'm 6. No, I'm just joking. I'm 5'11". 0.5 in centimeters. Let's see. That's 181 centimeters. That makes me sound like a tiny person. If someone ever asked how tall you are, and I said, oh, I'm 181 centimeters. What? Makes me sound Lilliputian. Yeah, it's a Lilliputian, the little people from Gulliver's Travels. Did you know he went to other places in those books? Like, he went to the tiny place, and then he went to a place where he was tiny, and then he went to a place full of, like, hot air balloons or something. I don't remember what the third or fourth place was, but nobody does. Everyone just remembers that he was a giant and there's tiny people running around. And I barely remember that he was tiny. But anyways, he would have... Tell me 181 centimeters doesn't sound tiny. Tell me that. Do I have time to do the Speargun story? Considering my rant on centimeters? I don't think I do. You know, here, okay, I'm going to be completely honest with the Speargun story. The Speargun story, I actually have a full episode, a 20-minute episode recorded of the Speargun story. And it is so creepy and disturbing that I recorded it a couple days ago and was like, I'm not going to release this. The sound of my voice towards the end, I'm just like, and that was an episode that I enjoyed recording from a technical standpoint and from a storytelling standpoint, but it's so grisly. And early in the podcast, we did some darker stuff. And as the podcast has evolved, I've kind of moved away from that. The Speargun story is far darker than anything we've covered before. I think so. I know there's going to be people who are like, I listened to that episode while I was eating Cheerios. It was no big deal. I did it. Yeah. That's fine. But for me, it was disturbing. And just the sheer inhumanity of it. So, you know, now that I've pumped it up, I think what I'll do, and it is a recorded episode, and I am running out of time this week, so I'm going to just use this as a teaser for that story, and I will release that one tomorrow, because I'm just going to do a quick overview of it, but I'll release the episode that I recorded, I'll edit it up, and to be honest, that helps, because, like I said, I'm short on time this week. To have recorded a full episode to not release was making it difficult, but I'm going to have to go in and put an ending in it or something. The episode just ends. I was just like, I'm done. But it is a very interesting story. But I'll warn you now, if you're not into... It's not super gory. It's just so inhumane. If you're not into that, just skip it. Just skip the next episode. Because the whole episode is just going to be that 20-minute story. So, I know I said it in the beginning, but I'm going to leave it in there as I don't even want to call it a teaser because the episode's such a downer. I thought about re-recording it with a big smile on my face, just so the tone was lifted a bit. But we're going to go ahead. So actually, that works out for me, because that means I don't have to record an episode tomorrow. But see, now I feel bad, because basically I've spent the last 5 minutes talking about other shit. Let me give you another interesting new news story. How's that? I don't want you to feel like you just had to listen to how the sausage was made for 5 minutes and it was kind of out. So let's give you another new news story here. Let's go out on a good note. Let's go out on a happy note. So, what do we got? This was something I was going to talk about later, but I think we'll find a good one for you here. Here's one. This is a funny one. The year 2004. We're in the country of Bahrain, which, if my geography tells me right, it is the Middle East. Sorry, I don't know why I spaced out on that. It's the Middle East, okay? Predominantly Muslim country. Now, everyone's chilling in the mosque, and they're getting ready for their sermon. And everyone's just kind of hanging out, doing their thing. And this dude walks up, big old beard, kind of moving towards the podium like they're going to deliver a sermon. And the cleric who's in charge of the church, or the mosque, I guess is the technical term, but the cleric who is in charge of the mosque notices this stranger he's never seen before start to walk up to the stand to deliver a sermon. And the cleric goes, hey, are you here to do a sermon? And the cleric's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm here to do a sermon. I'm here to speak to these fellow Muslim people here in this mosque. And the cleric, he said in his quote, his voice was strangely soft, and his beard slipped as he spoke. So imagine this big dude comes walking up, and you've never seen him before, and you're like, hey man, what's up? And they're like, oh, nothing. And then every time they move, their fake beard is moving farther and farther down his face. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this story isn't funny. It's kind of horrific, but in a different way. What happened was, so the cleric realizes that this is a woman with a beard on, and she wanted to give a speech because her brother got arrested or was being prosecuted or persecuted, one of the two, for something that he may or may not have done. And she was going to deliver this impassioned... This story's horrible. This isn't funny, Jason. This woman was going to deliver this impassioned speech on behalf of her brother. But once the cleric realized that it was a woman, he's like, no, get out, because they have to, in strict Muslim countries, the women and the men are separated. Well, and that, she wasn't wearing a burqa or anything like that. That would have been a bad disguise. She has a full burqa and a beard. And anyways, a bunch of guys showed up and they overpowered her. Sorry, I thought this story was going to be funnier. The image of a woman in a beard, it came off as something from like Kids Next Door, or like someone wearing a really bad disguise, like a really bad Santa suit, was how I envisioned the story when I read it. But now as I'm reading it out loud, it actually is quite sad that this woman broke all these rules to try to get her brother free. And then she got manhandled. She was surprisingly strong. It took 5 men to get her out. She did get arrested. She did get bailed out. Of course, this was in 2004, so I don't know what happened afterwards. Hopefully, her and her brother are out doing fine. Man, that story was not a fun story either. Yeah, I just imagined it more like a bad Santa suit, and then I realized all of the cultural and sexual and religious implications in that otherwise a slipping beard story. Now whenever I see a Santa with a bad beard, I'm like, I'm going to be reminded of this episode. And it's Christmas time, so that's going to happen a lot. Well, thanks for bearing with me. This was a weird episode. It was kind of off the cuff, because I made that change in the end, but we will do the Speargun story tomorrow. I'm not trying to hype it up too much, but it is an interesting story. But again, I have no problem if you guys skip it. deadrabbitradio@gmail.com is going to be your email address. You can also hit us up at facebook.com/deadrabbitradio. Twitter is @JasonOCarpenter. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.